and welcome once again to Ignite with Sandy, the weekly program where I bring to you wonderful women from all parts of the world, all walks of life, who've shared their experiences, their expertise with us. So, if you remember what Ignite with Sandy is, it's when I share stories, and when you hear those stories, it ignites up your neurons, ignites up those neurons in your brain that says, wow, if she can do it, so can I. So challenges are part of life, and life experiences are your biggest teacher. But you know what? It's not everybody who can share painful experiences, because sometimes we feel embarrassed, sometimes we're ashamed, sometimes just thinking about it can bring back a lot of pain and some very unpleasant memories. And it's only somebody with a very strong character, who is a fighter, who is determined to do something in life, who can actually talk about those unpleasant things. And when I heard my guest talking about her experiences, I was just blown away. She just stood there and she talked, and the hair on my hand started standing. I said, wow, look at her, so strong, so in control. And here we talk about small things and we get upset. So, I'm not going to give away too much, and I'm going to bring on my wonderful guest. And as you know, I never ever introduce them. I always get them to introduce themselves. So here we have my guest for today. Hello, my dear. Thank you very much for joining me on Ignite with Sandy. And please do introduce yourself to our guests.
Hi, Sandy. Lovely to see you. My name is Saj. But before I go and introduce myself, I just want to say it's an absolute honor and privilege to be sharing this space with you. I know it's been a little bit time coming, but I've been looking forward to it because from the moment I met with you, we had a conversation which has led to this today. And I've been waiting in anticipation to follow up that conversation. So, as a way of introduction, my name is Saj, says Zafar. I am a CEO of Leadership Academy. Basically, I'm a coach for women, and I teach women everything to do with leadership. But I'm not what you would consider a textbook coach in the sense that I don't do. My teachings are not your universal, generic coaching things that you and I could learn from a university or any form of school. Because I'm a psychologist, I'm a certified coach. I'm a facilitator, I'm a accredited trainer, and more important, the school of life has taught me many things. And what I've done, I bottled everything together, made it into a blended formula, and I've taken that, and those are the things that I actually bring into the space of coaching, knowing that I'm not the only one, who's gone through these experiences. There are many like me. My story resonates on many levels with many women across the world. And I know that it resonated with you when you first heard me on stage, and hence the invitation to come along and share this with your audience. So essentially, that's what I do, and that's my introduction.
Wonderful, my dear. And of course, if anybody were to read your profile, it's like, whoa, what what hasn't she done? But you know what, Zaj, I know it's a bit private, so I will leave it entirely up to you. But would you please share would you please share your journey about how you got to the UK, and your childhood, and other things to brought you to your very special first assignment when you ended up in prison?
Wow. Okay. I'm going to try to keep this succinct because the journey is quite long. But essentially, what it is, I'm a daughter of migrant parents, both illiterate, uneducated. In the 1970s, my father left Kashmir to go to the UK, like most people from that part of the world, to go and look for work. And shortly thereafter, he invited myself and my mom to go and be with him. And whilst most Asian families settled in what I call the cities and towns, unfortunately, my father, being a labourer, he found work in a rural mining town. So we were the first Asian family, the Asian first Pakistani family to live in this rural small mining town. And I remember that my life was pretty uneventful for the first few years. And it's only when I went to school that I realized that I was very different to all the other children. And I know this is a massive milestone for many children. The first day at school, when you go, and there's a lot of anticipation, excitement that you're going to be hanging out with other children. There's going to be teachers. There's going to be learning. And unfortunately, my experience was somewhat different, because when my mother left me at the school gates, it dawned on me that I looked different. I spoke differently. I didn't speak a word of English because we spoke Punjabi Urdu in the house. Both my parents couldn't speak a word of English. And, my mother had dressed me in this beautiful, colourful, outfit, which was very distinctively different to all what the other young girls were wearing. And on top of that, what she'd done, she'd placed a lot of oil into my hair and braided it and put a hole in my eyes. And I'm guessing, looking back as a young mom, she really wanted me to look perfect going into school for the first day. But what that inadvertently did, I stuck out like a sore thumb. And so other children started to poke and prod me. Teachers were frustrated with me, the fact that I couldn't speak English. And so sadly, the school where I went for learning ended up being my place of torment and abuse. So it wasn't long, I've authored a book where I wrote that it wasn't long before I learned to fight, before I could read and write. And it really was about protecting myself, because consistently I found myself being pushed, kicked, bitten, hair being pulled, other children refusing to sit next to me because they would say that they could smell curry on me. And of course, I couldn't express or articulate myself, and the teachers would get very flustered and frustrated with me. And so that became the rhythm or the pattern of my school life. So by the time I was 11, I was not very familiar of being in detention, not being able to keep up with my schoolwork, because any schoolwork that was given to me, when I brought it home, both my parents couldn't understand it, read it, or even support me in any way. So I really, really struggled. And the fact that we were the only Asian family in this all white town, I had no friends. So it was a very lonely existence. And so by the time I was 11, I went to high school, thinking and wishing that things would be slightly different, but unfortunately they weren't. The fights that I got into got more bloodier, the bruises got more darker, and it just was an absolute nightmare. And it was around this time, one late night after detention, I'd had a really messy fight there that day with a couple of girls. And as a consequence, I was placed into detention. And I'll never forget, it was a cold, late night in November. And I was very late leaving school. And I was so frightened that, again, when I would reach home, my mum would really curse me and possibly beat me for being late again, that I decided to take a shortcut. And it was during this shortcut, which took me off the main route, that I soon heard that there were some footsteps behind me. And I just knew that these footsteps were not right. So I picked up pace, I started to run, and then I heard that the footsteps also started to run. And it was only when I felt something in my back that I swung round and I saw one of the girls pulling out a pair of scissors, and I saw the sharp blades of the scissors, and that's when I realized I'd been stabbed. And now any other normal child at the age of 11, would have got distraught or, I don't know, had a breakdown. But my biggest worry was, as she pulled out the pair of scissors, I turned around and started to run. And within the short space of time, I felt my arm go, my shoulder go. And it's when I peeled off my coat, I felt my fingers were really sticky from all the blood that was gushing out. And the lining of my whole coat was just literally soaking. And the only thought that I got preoccupied with was that how am I going to get home and hide this from my mother, who I knew would just beat me when she found out that this had happened. And I was far more scared of her reaction than the fact that this very serious incident had taken place. And I reached home, and luckily, mum wasn't home, and I ran upstairs. I rang my friend who lived a couple of doors away, and I said to her, bring some sellotape, bring some talcum powder, and lots of cotton wool. And bless her, she turned up with this carrier bag of all of this, make do first aid kit. And between us, we tried to seal the wound, but the wound was so deep, we just couldn't do it. And eventually, my mother found out. I had to go to the hospital. The police were involved. I never disclosed who those girls were. But I think that was a very pivotal moment for me when I realized that the life that I was born into, with all the bullying, the violence, and everything, it wasn't the life that I wanted. And the wake up call was I needed to get out of this hole that I was in. And I remember thinking the only way to do this is to get an education, but everything was against me because I wasn't good at studying, I wasn't good at reading and writing, I wasn't good at grades, but it felt like this was the only my ticket out. And cut a long story short, things got worse before they got better. By the time I was 15, one evening I come home and only to find out that I am now engaged to my first cousin back in Kashmir, which really, leads me to have a meltdown. I remember going on hunger strike for 3 weeks, refusing to eat, because I wanted my parents to tell me that this wasn't true, but unfortunately they said it was true, and that's what the expectation was. I tried to tell the teachers at school, hoping that they would advocate for me, but sadly they didn't. They also, told me that the best that I could expect from my life was an arranged marriage and some children. And I just was very determined. I was determined that this was not going to be my life. I was not going to fulfill any stereotype. And I definitely wasn't going to sign up to a life that didn't involve independence, freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of travel, freedom of just being. And so by the time I was 19, and the bit that sorry I've missed out was, so I took a heavy overdose because I'd grown up with that shame and the guilt and that reinforcement of that the only way, if you were a Pakistani or an Asian girl living in the UK, growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, the only way to escape that life was through marriage or death. And my mother, consistently reinforced this message, reminding me that if you've got any ideas about wanting to leave, the only way you will leave the family home is if we get you married off. And if that's not going to be happening, then the only other way is to die. And so I opted for the latter, thinking, okay, I'm definitely not going to get married, so I want to die. And sadly, I was around 15 when I took a heavy overdose. I was rushed into hospital, had my stomach pumped out, and the next day I was in front of this beautiful white psychiatrist. And I poured my heart out, expecting again that somehow she would be my rescue. Sadly, she wasn't my rescue, and she invited both my parents in and told my father that I was having an identity crisis. My father's interpretation of this was a one-way ticket back to Kashmir, a place where I'd been born, but I'd come to the UK as a baby. I had no connection or no affiliation with this place. So now I'm 16 years old. And one minute I'm lying on my bed, daydreaming of pop stars and having the freedom of music and dressing in Western clothes and living my life. And the next I find myself um, on an aeroplane with a one-way ticket to a small rural village in the Himalayan mountains, at the foot of the mountains, in a small village where there's no electricity or running water. And that's where I stayed for 2 years and 4 months and 15 days before I managed to negotiate a return to the family home back in the UK. And it was this negotiation that I will agree to get married if my father agreed to let me go to university. I'd always been interested in psychology, so no surprise, I ended up studying forensic psychology. And on the last day of my graduation, I ran away. I ran away and went missing. And I moved from city to city for about 6 weeks until I had this realization that this was no fun. This was not a life of freedom. This, again, I was shackled by this fear that if I got caught, I would either be killed or I would end up being deported. So I thought, this is not worth it. I need to come out of hiding. And that's, I guess, it's probably the biggest risk I took, but it was and probably one of the most bravest things I did. I contacted my father and I met him in a public place, and it's the day when my life changed. And in that moment, in that conversation, he asked me why I was doing what I was doing, and I couldn't, there was no drama, there was no big explanation other than to simply say to him that I just want my freedom. I want my freedom to be, to exist, to live, to love, all of the things that I felt I had a right to. And I think in that moment something happened, and I think what he probably thought was there was nothing was going to stop me. And that's when he decided to give me his blessing, and he said, and I think, looking back, there was something that he said, and for a long time I didn't really think on that. He passed away 4 years ago, and it's only around that time when I started to remember what he actually said. And I realized it was the biggest compliment and the biggest blessing that he could have given to me. And he said to me, you are my son. And at the time, I think I thought, really? Is that the best you're going to, I'm your daughter and you're calling? Then I realized that the connotations of that was that, he knew that in order to let me go, he had to reframe his thinking and say that this isn't my daughter, this is my son. So he gave me his blessings. And, with that blessing, I came to London and I graduated in forensic psychology. So I knew I would either end up working with the police or in prisons. And that's how I ended up in prison, working inside a prison, and
Yeah.
became the first youngest Asian woman, Muslim woman, to become a prison governor. And the
Wow.
Sandy, can I just say, the irony of my story is that, all my life, I tried to escape the life that I was born into to only find comfort inside a real prison.
Yeah, that's really ironic. But you know something, the other part that really intrigued me when I heard you was you were sent to this place to sort of you know be in charge, and it was your first job, and obviously you had absolutely no clue. So can you just walk us through your experience then? Also very important, some of the lessons that you learned, because um you were told, that that facility was at the lowest in the ranking, and unless things changed, nothing was going to happen. So could you share that part, please?
Of course. I spent 6 months in what is known as a prison service college, and you're there training to be a prison governor. And on the last day of my graduation, there was 20 of us, 17 men, 2 white women, and myself, and we were handed a brown envelope, and inside the envelope was the name of the prison that you were allocated to. And naturally, because we were students fresh from college, they wanted to send us to prisons that were going to be low risk and somewhere where we could bed in our learning. And when I read the name that was on my brown envelope, it was HMP Wormwood Scrubs, one of the most notorious and dangerous high-risk prisons in UK as well as Europe. So so this is my prison that I'm going to go to, and one of the things, one of my teachings I share with everybody readily is that no amount of teachings, textbooks teachings, ever prepare you for leadership. So essentially, I was going into the prison to lead, and everything I'd learned through the books and through the role plays, through the scenarios, through the discussions, right, completely went out of the window, because when you're facing real life situations and you're in heightened state of stress, that is when your true character or your true ability comes to the forefront. And in the psychology world, we say either you fight or you flight. And the thing was, I didn't have a choice to flight. I had to fight. And I'll never forget, on the very first evening, there was a serious incident, and the staff looked to me as their leader to show them to navigate the situation. And my mind just went blank. And in that moment, I just froze. I had no idea what to do. And I think that's where I learned my first lesson, that don't pretend. My trainer had always said to me, Saj, don't ever try to pretend to be something that you're not. And if you don't know something, say you don't know. And that's when I leaned into the next in command, and I said, I have no idea what we should be doing. What do you think we should do? And he was really shocked, because he was an officer, I was a governor. He'd obviously been there for 33 years and knew exactly what to do. And I think, he half smiled and half thought, really? We've got this young female that's put in charge, of us, the prison, the staff, the prisoners, and she's got no clue as to what she's doing. And, that really exposed me and made me vulnerable. But what it did do, I think it also earned me the respect that this was somebody who was genuine, who wasn't going to make things up, and who was very much clued up not only to the strengths that she held, but she also what her limitations were. And there were lots of incidents that followed where I realized that it's not the textbook stuff that puts you in good stead or makes you a leader. It's the things that are from within you, your own experiences, your own values that come to the forefront. And similarly, I think what you're asking me to share, Sandy, is the incident where one evening, I found myself walking into a serious incident where a young prisoner was hanging, attempting suicide. And the officer that was holding him up, as I walked into the cell, I saw that this young man was hanging. His face was blue. He had a noose around his neck. There was stuff, a drug overdose that was coming out of his mouth. He was changing colour. But the poor officer that was holding him up, by his knees, he was also losing the grip. And in that moment of panic, like I said, I just instantly found myself running downstairs, unlocking the kitchen cabinet, taking a knife out of the kitchen cabinet, and running back upstairs, cutting the noose, and both the officer and the prisoner collapsed onto the floor, by which time the medical help came. They managed to resuscitate the officer. And, everybody was full of praise that we'd managed to save this young man. But the following morning, I was held in court for actually placing myself, the officer, and the prisoner at risk by compromising security, by rushing downstairs and using a knife. And the thinking around that was that the prisoner could have been faking, and hence you placed yourself and the officer at risk by doing what you did. Now, but at that time, instinctively, that was the right thing to do. And, I made peace with it in my own mind that it's okay. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. It's okay to sit back and reflect. And unless you are walking in those shoes at that precise moment, you just can't know what you would do in that situation. And I remember answering the panel of investigators, and I said, the thing that runs through my head is, I have two scenarios. Either I watch somebody die on my watch, right, and do the right thing, or I do the right thing by saving their life, but putting myself at risk and my job online. And I said, even if you ask me again, what would I do? I would do the latter. For me, that conversation I had with his parents to say your son tried to commit suicide, but luckily, by God of grace, he's okay. That was much better conversation than the one, you know, um, I'm sorry to say that we've lost your son because we were following contingency plans.
Yes, quite true, quite true. The other part I think that I'd like you to share is because there was a time when you were told, since this prison was at the lowest rank, unless things improved, it would have to close down, and it would close down on your watch. And
Yes.
what did you actually do at that time? Because I think that is also part of your leadership skills coming to the fore. So, what did you do at that time?
So, literature textbooks will consistently remind us that leadership is not your positional authority. And sometimes I find people readily, say these things, but do they truly understand it? So, my understanding of that is that throughout my leadership journey, I've always found that there is no me, myself, and I. Very early on in my leadership journey, I found out that true leadership is about people, it's about building relationships, it's about having a vision, but more importantly, having a vision that other people buy into. And so I was in a prison which sadly had been investigated, and the inspectors had come in, and they'd said that it was being threatened to be closed down because it was really unfit for purpose, and it had high deaths in custody. It had the ever increasing drugs, attempted suicides. It was a horrendous place, but for both staff and prisoners. And I was there, and the thing is, it was a tall order. It was a very tall order because we were given 2 years to turn this prison around. And I remember at the time thinking, how am I going to get this into the place where it can be decent, it can be healthy and purpose? And the vision I held was, it was very, very simple. And I think sometimes as leaders, we overly think things. And for me, it's always about stripping it about and keeping it simple. So the vision that I had was that as long as we can make this place clean, as long as we can get the prisoners and staff alike to come together, to work together as a collective and make this into a decent, purposeful, healthy place, we are going to be at the risk of closing down. And, it's through that sharing of the vision, but more importantly, giving the staff the tools, the confidence, the belief that this is theirs. They've got to invest in, one of the things that you have to be able to do is to get them to emotionally invest themselves, because no matter how much you try to convince people, nobody will buy into it unless they believe in that vision. And so for me, it was really, really important to get the buy-in. And it was fair, very, very quickly I was able to do that, because I wasn't sort of dictating. I wasn't sitting from outside and saying, oh, this is what you guys are going to do, and under my watch. It was very much, what are we going to do? And I think it's the power of we. What are we going to do? And I'll never forget one of the staff, one of the senior officers came to me and he said, "Oh, you want to clean it up? Who's going to clean this place? It's literally, I'm not going to swear, but he used very colourful language." And I said, "The prisoners are going to clean this prison up." And he looked at me and he said, "What do you mean?" And again, it's about thinking out the box. And I said, "Well, they live here. So, we don't have money to get cleaners in. So whilst they are living here, they're going to have to start cleaning their space, basically the space that they live in, the space where they eat, the space where they go to work, the space where they go for education." And it was instilling those simple things that, within 18 months, we went from 138th position to number one. And the inspectors walked in and they were just horrified. They were like, "How did you manage to do that?" And again, it wasn't me standing there in the spotlight and saying, "Me, myself, I." It was like, it's the team, it's the staff, it's the prisoners, and always giving them free rein to go out onto the landers to talk to people. And generally, what they picked up was this woman, came in, she knew what she wanted. And what she wanted was for both workers, the officers, and prisoners to have a safe and clean and decent, purposeful space. And there was no trimmings, there was nothing, there was no policies or strategies or complicated brochures or anything. It was just a single vision, and every day we took actions to get us to get to that place of being clean and safe and purposeful.
Wonderful. You know something? Sometimes, especially in sales, we have this thing called KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And
Absolutely,
yes,
absolutely.
and I think what you were able to do is actually reach out to people and make them feel important, make them feel valued, that
Always, always.
their contributions, their effort, their thoughts, everything counted. So I think that is one of the most important things that leadership is all about, isn't it?
It is, and there are different styles of leadership. I, for one, sign up to serving. I don't, for me, leadership is all about serving others. And I think if you can serve others, and if you make your work into purpose, then it doesn't feel like work. And I think, people often get asked, how can you work in a prison? How can you work with rapists and people who've killed and harmed and abused? And I said, "Listen, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to judge. They're on my watch. They happen to be in a space that I'm responsible." But the plaque that says, outside of the prison, it says the words are, "We will contain them, we will protect the public, but more importantly, we will show them, duty of care." And my leadership is all about humanity. I don't give it any other name. When you strip it back, that's what it comes down to: treating others the way you want to be treated. And having spent a lifetime being
Yes,
invisible, having spent a
exactly.
lifetime being an underdog, having spent a lifetime when other people give up on you, having
Yes,
spent a lifetime where I had no hope or aspirations or ambitions. So I know what it feels like. And many of these, I tend to work in male prisons, and you know, I often got asked, why do you work with them? And I said, the reason why I work with them because they are somebody's son, brother, they are somebody's husband, they are somebody's father. And that's what I see. I never go and look at their records. I've never, in all the time that I've been a prison girl, I've never asked anybody, why are you here? What offenses do you commit? Because I'm not interested,
quite
because I'm
true.
not here to punish you. I'm
Yes,
not here to use that against you or to dictate my ego or my sense of purpose by, making you feel bad because you've committed an offense and I'm on this side of the table.
quite
That's not
true.
my job. That's not my
So
job
when,
at all.
when did you decide to leave this place and move on to your next project?
2019, um, and this is a true story. 2019, I had a nosebleed. was rushed into hospital. Within half an hour of arriving at the hospital, I had a CT scan. Within a couple of hours of that CT scan, I had a neurosurgeon telling me that it didn't look good and that there was a shadow on my brain in the form of a tumor. And what they didn't know at that point, because they did the biopsy, that was it going to it looked dangerous, and it looked terminal. And so, and I think, I was processing what was being essentially an end of life conversation. And as I sat there, Sandy, my life didn't flash before my eyes. I didn't have this big, film type, drama type moment. It was very simple, and I typically I became very practical. Or I thought to myself, okay, I've got two beautiful children, I've got a husband, who, by the way, when the doctors were talking, he was just crying in the corner, just this 6'2" heap of mess. And I'm looking at him thinking, okay, fine, if I'm not going to be around, you need to pull yourself together for the sake of the boys. And in that moment, I started to think about, my funeral. And I started to think about who would turn up. But more importantly, I started to think about my so called life, or what would people think, or what would people say on hearing of my death. And it was that bit that made me feel uncomfortable, because it made me think, oh my gosh, am I really going to be missed by anybody? And the question was no. I mean, sorry, the answer was no. Outside of my immediate family, there would be nobody that would miss me. And what memories was I leaving behind? And I thought hardly anything. Yes, I'd worked in prisons. Yes, I'd helped people. But really, when you stripped it back, and that's when I think, that moment when you're faced with your own mortality, and I'm a woman of faith. I don't shy away from that. I ended up having a conversation, and the conversation was very clear with God. It was a no negotiation, and it really was about, I've had a really stinky, crappy life. I've been struggling all my life, and now when the time has come, when I've started through therapy, counseling, coaching, I've started to get better. I'm starting to fulfill, my purpose. You decide that you're going to shut me down and call me to wherever it is that I'm going to be called to. And I was so angry. I was so angry. And I thought, no, you can't do this to me. My worth and my life has to mean something. And you've got to give me a second chance. And, I don't know, but I like to think God was on duty that day and he did listen to me carefully, because 12 months later, the tumor, everything disappeared. Um, you know, uh, by God's grace, made full recovery. And that's when I decided that I no longer was going to do my prison work, and I was going to actually start my business. And the bit that I leaned into was that, I've always enjoyed coaching women. And I thought to myself, I'm not alone. Uh, and I want to pay back. I want to be able to pave the way for other women. And if it means getting uncomfortable, if it means talking about things that we're not comfortable talking about, and if it means, holding somebody's hand through the healing process, then I'm happy to do that. And I literally resigned, set up my coaching business, and I haven't looked back.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. And I think a lot of it depends not about how you attract people, because it's all about you. And
Yes,
a lot of people think it's like about everybody else. But when you decide to do something and you have a plan and you go ahead and do it because you believe in it, and you're
yes,
genuine about it, and you are speaking from experience,
yes,
not so much expertise. Expertise is there, the book stuff, but you
yes,
actually lived through it. I think
yes.
that's what makes the difference, because
And
experience is your best teacher.
yeah, and we all want to be listened to. We all want to be heard. I think we all crave that connection. we crave that validation. And you can only do that if you've got empathy
Yes.
and if you've actually gone through that journey yourself. So, I have this famous quote that I always say to the women that I work with. And I say, for a long time when I used to share my story, it was like I was bleeding. I was opening up wounds and I was always bleeding, And I think women, we revel in that. If one woman is bleeding, we all want to bleed together. So, and it was only through the healing process, and I knew that I was being healed, was that I started to share my story through the scars. So today, when I stand on stage, when I work with women, I'm always sharing from my scars, because what I want them to understand is that by opening up wounds and,
Yes.
doing the deep dive, that's not what you need to do. You need to heal, and you need to actually believe that what was, was then, what is now, and is where you're going. And,
Yes.
too often we spend, better than I do, most women, we occupy that where we've been. We consistently stay where we've been rather than thinking about where we need to go. And hence we get stuck. So for me, it's about having undergone the experiences that I've gone and the journey that I've taken. I've made this into my life calling, and I pray 5 times a day. With each prayer, I say to God, bring me or align me with people that need my help, my support. And if during that time I can support you by hand holding you, by kicking your backside, by pulling you along or carrying you, then I will do whatever it takes to help you from where you are to where you need to be.
Yeah,
So,
so talking about all of this counseling that you do to make women stronger, happier in their lives, etc. So that's the part of the business which has grown from your own personal experiences. So
yeah,
talking about now and in the future, you said you're married and you mentioned that you have kids. So being this mom who is on a crusade, what do the kids think of their mom?
they are so proud, Sandy. And then mini me, they are coaches. Oh my God, I have two sons, 18 and 17.
Okay.
And I was speaking to we were having dinner with a set of parents, and I said at that dinner table, I said, all your life, all you can do, parenthood doesn't come with a manual, by the way, right? Out of all the roles that I've held, I think the most challenging is of a parent. And because, you're not only raising them or trying to do your best, but basically you are the product of your own experiences. So how you are, that will shape that relationship. And I've always deliberately, consciously, from the moment they were born, I made a promise to myself that I would never ever be the parents that I had. And I know that sounds a little bit out there, but for another episode, but I'm not going to talk about that now. So when I was raising my boys, I always wanted to make sure that I was the best mom ever. And I said, now, at 18 and 17, they are young men. And when I listen to them, when I observe their manners, when I observe their behaviors, I'm telling you, I gush with pride. And the reason why I gush with pride, that despite everything that I went through, and life wasn't easy, as I've shared some parts, they are the best thing that's ever happened to me. And they are the best accolade that I could receive. Because when I look at them, then I know that I've done something right in this life.
So true, my dear. I can just about imagine the sense of pride, the sense of love, accomplishment, so many things that must be going through your mind when you see the product that you have produced and
Yeah.
where they are today. So uh, we're coming to the end of our podcast, my love. But before we sign off, I'd like you to give us 5 points of what women should be looking at.
The first and foremost, my message to women is don't be wedded to struggle. Don't be defined by the person that you were born or the family or the circumstances you were born into. So create your own circumstances. Number two, how you do that is through your mindset. Okay? When you change your thinking, the rest will follow. Number three, three things. You need to think with three brains. Too often women think with one brain, and that's the grey matter in the head. I always say you have to think with three brains: your head, your heart, and your instinct. Okay? When these three brains are aligned, that is when you are in a way, in a space where you are connected, where you are centered, where you are calm, and the decisions that you make in that state are the best ones that will move you forward. Number four, clarity. So many of us are running on a treadmill of life. The thing about the treadmill, you can turn it up, you can turn it down, but it doesn't take you anywhere. So you need to get off the treadmill and you need to think about, where is it I'm going? And most of the things that shackle you, most of the things that hinder you, most of the obstacles that you keep thinking about and seeing are not external to you. They are within your control. They're your inner emotional baggage. And last and least of all, without any clear direction, without any plan, and without action, you'll consistently stay where you are. So, so important to know that you can dream, you can hope, you can write plans down, you can write your journals, you can do your gratitude. But if you don't take the actions every single day towards what it is that you've invested in or what is you desire, you'll stay where you are.
Wonderful, my dear. You couldn't have put it better than that. It was absolutely fabulous having you on Ignite with Sandy on the Celestial platform. We're so happy that
Thank
you made
you.
the time,
Thank you. Thank you.
to come
Anytime.
and join us. And I'm sure we will be interacting a lot more.
We
You did
will.
come to Dubai, and I'm hoping that sooner or later you will be making
Yes.
Dubai a base for yourself. So, from all of us, thank you very much and all the best. See you soon in Dubai. God
Thank you.
bless.
God bless.
So, there you have it, a very no holes barred, gloves off, extremely honest, and a person who is strong enough to share, because a lot of us hide, a lot of us pretend. And this is what I like about Saj. She's just there. This is me. This is what I went through. I don't want sympathy. I don't want you to feel bad for me. This is my life. This is how I handled it. And this is how I'm moving forward. And in doing that, she is actually helping a lot of us to realize that we shouldn't pretend. We need to be honest. We need to be need to admit to ourselves what's not happening, what's happening, and what we should be doing. And it's not a bad thing, it's not a weakness if we say we can't do it or it's not possible and I need help. We're not all super women, none of us are. And Sarja is a very good example. From a little girl who went through so much trauma, she turned out to be stronger. So I was quite amused actually because prison was a place where she learned a lot about leadership skills, about empathy, about inclusion, about so many different things. And what a place to learn, right? But as you can see, attitude is what gets us to the next step. And as she said, please don't be on that treadmill because you'll be going nowhere. So jump off that treadmill and we'll see you next week. So remember, before you go and switch this off to another channel, you have to like us, you have to subscribe, and most important, you got to share this episode on all your social media platforms so that a lot more people can know and be aware of what is happening, what can be done, and what should be done. So, on that happy note, take care and bye for now. God bless.